everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Indie Diarist podcast, a show on the human stories behind indie game development. This is your loyal Indie Diarist and host, Anthony Wolf, and this is a very, very, very interesting and special episode. It is Indie Diary number 69, a very nice number, I would say, and in line with the topic, well, not the topic, in line with the spirit of this episode, I wanted to invite a very special guest to take part today. His name is Evan Greenwood. He's the founder and currently creative director of Free Lives, which is a development studio under Devolver Digital, who's published a number of games, including Terranil, but especially under the guidance of Evan himself, games such as Broforce and I'd say thematically with the current episode, Genital Jousting. So I will not say anything else. It's just going to be a very interesting episode all through. But before we go on, I want to shout out to my amazing patrons who are Zagini, Fishpandev, and Peleg. You guys are incredible. Thank you so much for your unwavering support. If you too want to support the show and want more episodes like this one, listeners, you can go on to patreon.com/theindiediarist or check out the links in the description. But now, let's get into what could possibly be the nicest episode of the Indie Diarist. Alright, hello everybody and welcome to a new episode of the Indie Diarist podcast. Now, some of you may remember a very peculiar game that came out some time ago called Genital Jousting. It was pretty popular and pretty much everywhere. Got banned from Twitch from what I remember. That was a very interesting moment. But I've got here with me Evan Greenwood, the founder and creative director of Free Lives, the studio behind Genital Jousting, and not only just that. So we're going to dive into your story, Evan, but we're going to also dive into all the different games that that you worked on, your approach to game development. But before anything else, please say a few things about yourself, where you're based, what you're doing right now, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Hi there. Hi, Ant. My name's Evan Greenwood. You introduced me very well. Thank you. I make games. That's the part of the job, I guess, that I love doing. I do, in some way, run a studio as well, but I have other people who are far more organized than me doing almost all of the organizational duties. And I try to stay as close as I can to purely making games and giving feedback on games and offering some mild direction. But the studio runs something like a collective. Last year there were 3 games going on at the same time with different kind of leadership in each one, and I had very little influence over what happened. Other than the influence of being in the room and like walking through ideas and that kind of thing, but not. I can't take credit for the direction on those games exactly, but maybe I don't know. Maybe there's some sort of spirit of the collective organization which kind of guides us. And I did mention I wanted to talk a little bit about how games come about in that sense a little later. But yeah, I love making games. I'm a designer, a reluctant programmer. I do a bit of I can do a tiny bit of art. I enjoy art, but I don't get to do it because there's just people that are far more talented than me that I have the great luck of working with.
Great. Yeah, well, love how you describe Free Lives and the fact that, I mean, I suppose it's also in the name of the studio. We'll get there, but it does sound like there's a lot of creative energy around the studio, and we'll get there. So my listeners are used to this now, but basically we have a little thing called a prologue segment in these episodes, and it's just a little icebreaker, about 60 seconds, where I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions, and you can try to answer as many as you can. There's no reward at the end. It's just a way to pretty much get in the mood, and then we will slow down and take the appropriate time to answer other questions as we go. So are you ready for this speed dating section, I would say?
As ready as I'll ever be. I've never done this before. I hope I've got some good answers. Let's see.
Right. So I have a little soundboard here, so I'm going to start the music with the countdown, and also start the countdown at the same time as I ask you the first question, which is, what is the first game you ever fell in love with?
Montezuma's Revenge.
Never heard of that. I'm going to have to look.
It's very old. It's 2 colors. It was orange and black, but it was a platformer. Yeah.
Okay. If you could only play one genre for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I mean, it's probably going to be deck builders. Yeah.
Okay, right. What's the most underrated game everyone needs to play?
I don't think it's underrated, but I find myself recommending it so often to explain a concept. It's Pony Island by Daniel Mullins.
Oh, I love Pony Island. Yes.
It's amazing. It's well rated, but it's underplayed. I think criminally
underplayed. Definitely, I like that. Yeah. Do you have a favorite gaming snack?
No, I don't. I forget to eat. I forget to eat.
Okay, you forget to eat.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Do you have a guilty pleasure game, something you love but no isn't perfect?
Oh, jeez. No.
Okay.
I hate bad games.
You hate bad games. Okay. We're at time. Okay, great. Loved it.
Oh, those are good questions. I'm proud of all the games I play. Is the thing. When I enjoy a game, I tell everyone, and when I try and make them see my point of view. There's no guilt.
No, I mean that's a perfectly good answer, and I think I'm the same. I mean, I can't think of a guilty pleasure game. I kind of like all of the ones that I play. I always find some value in all of them.
I was just gonna say, I do occasionally play a game so much that I feel like I feel guilty to myself. There's a game called Sanabi, which is quite popular. It's like it's an action platformer. I played it in one sitting, and I got like a sort of my cornea got a tear in it because I hadn't been blinking.
Wow.
So
okay.
My eyes got so dry from playing this game because it's a quite high intensity a lot of the time. Great music, amazing music, good story. It's a little like Katana Zero, if you know that.
Oh, I love Katana Zero. Yes.
So it's that kind of vibe. It's very much that kind of vibe, but it's a little more intense. And I realized afterwards I'd done myself physical harm by playing the game.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. I have a feeling that I will come out of this episode with a list of games that I really need to check out because some of these I've played, some others not so much. So yeah, I'm gonna have to look. But we did cover most of the questions. Actually, the next one would have had to be one about your favorite game character, or if you could be a game character for a day, who would you be?
Another game that I played way too much of back in the day was Bulletstorm.
Yes, I remember that. Mm-hmm.
I played that game, I beat it, then I started playing it immediately again on a harder difficulty, beat it, and then started playing on like the nightmare difficulty and realized it was like 10 in the morning the next day, and but I enjoyed it. I liked being in that world, slowing down time. I don't think I didn't mention this in my intro. I was one of the leads or maybe director on the game Broforce, so you can probably see some thematic tie-ins with a game like Bulletstorm and Broforce. It's like silly but muscular men that are acting very serious, but tongue-in-cheek, kind of going about their action duties in a manly but ridiculous way,
exactly. And we'll actually get into that because it's one of the things that you mentioned in one of your first emails to me, which is you like to criticize or at least look at masculinity in a very comedic way. But I think now we can slow down. We've covered the prologue, and we can take the appropriate time to answer the questions that are coming up. So this is episode 69. I feel it's going to be full of little puns. So let's start at the tip. Let's start with the origins of your story. What would you say is your earliest memory that has to do with video games? What's the first thing you remember?
Remember is I have distinct some of my fondest early memories are like seeing a game on my friend's computer. They had a better computer than me growing up. So, like, I would down the road. I would often, it's one of those friends where maybe I was friends with them because they had a nice computer, or at least that's why I became friends with them first. And they had a game. They had a CGA like monitor, so they were like 4 colors or something. That was it was incredible. I didn't have that. I spent my time after seeing this game drawing maps for it. I just got crayons and pieces of A4 paper stick together. Each A4 page was in my mind, a level of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would just stick them together and make a kind of Spelunky style kind of map
Wow. Okay.
of this like cave world. And like I loved doing it, and I got to the end of this and was like, okay, now I want to play it. And I'm like, there's it's a drawing. I can't play it, and no one can play it.
Yeah, of course, of course. Well, actually, did you ever go back to those drawings if you still have them and actually made
I
something with them?
I don't have them, but I have. I in most of the games I've worked on, particularly Broforce, I've been the level designer. I've got to like
Uh-huh.
live out these childhood fantasies. I feel very fulfilled in
That's nice. That's
the career I've chosen and the opportunities I've had.
Yeah, and about that career and the opportunities that you've had, like when did you realize that you wanted to make games? Because I feel like there's always this watershed moment where you're playing games and at some point realize, actually, I would like to create something like this. I would say maybe it started when you began drawing those levels on like A4 sheet paper,
Yeah,
pieces of paper. But
I have there's like a diary entry from when I was 10 that said I want to be a video game designer, and I don't think that ever exactly changed. So what I didn't say in my intro is I'm from South Africa. If I'd been, say, in America or the UK or somewhere else where there was a video game scene, after high school, I would have done everything I could to insinuate myself into one of those companies and just get in there. But there was no one around to do that. So I took a few years after high school building kind of websites, interactive things. Using Flash was a thing back in the day. Those kinds of tools, which maybe set me up for being able to, learning some skills I could apply later, but definitely wasn't rewarding in the way I would have. It wasn't the dream I'd had of myself, and I wasn't really entirely enjoying it. At least the parts I enjoyed most about it were often the parts the clients didn't like. It was like, I want to make it very interactive, and I want to kind of make basically a game, and then the client would be like, no, we need a website, sorry. But then around like 2006, indie games started to become a thing, like Jonathan Blow's Braid, and like
Right.
a couple years later, there's Spelunky by Derek Yu, and like
Spelunky.
games like that. And I'm like, one person made these things, or one person with a little bit of help. Like I can do it, and the tools were starting to kind of get a lot more mature. Like Unity was out.
Yeah.
It was only on Mac at the time, but I managed to get a Mac and start learning how to do that. And then just made games until eventually I was employed, and then eventually given a little bit of seniority, and then used that to make eventually successful. Made a lot of terrible games for a long while, and then eventually made a couple of good
Well,
ones.
don't we all though? That's that's the thing. But yeah, no, I remember that first wave of indie games when they exploded. There was Braid, there was Limbo, there were a lot of great games at the time, and
Yeah.
it felt like a new dawn for the gaming
Yeah.
industry in some ways, or at least one part of the
Yeah.
gaming
No,
industry.
each new game would be kind of revisiting something that had existed, had antecedents from the 90s or the 2000s, early 2000s. There'd be some like low, some much more, much simpler version of it. Something like Spelunky. Spelunky is a lot like Montezuma's Revenge, that game that I mentioned, which was my first love. It's like Montezuma's Revenge was a game where you just go down into a cave system. Well, in the case of Montezuma, it's almost like tombs. But they're both tomb raiding games, collecting treasure and surviving against snakes and that kind of. And they're both platforming games. So Spelunky comes out, but it's got a twist. It's now taken from drawn from roguelike type experiences that had existed in a very different kind of the RPG, minimalist RPG format only at that point, and kind of employing that in a platformer, and suddenly you get this very different experience, all these emergent effects that Derek Yu was in many ways pioneering. So my point being, all of these games felt like pioneer games back then, and now there's amazing games being made. I think we live in a very blessed time for indie gaming, but the gaps between them are nowhere near as wide. It's not as often where a game comes out and you're like, I never knew that could even be made, which felt like the monthly experience back then.
True. Yeah, it's true. It's true. I remember that. Yeah, and how did your first days with Free Lives come to be? Actually, how did that happen? Basically.
So Free Lives, this company that I guess own and work at, formed around Broforce. We were. I'd gotten a little bit of money from a previous project that I had worked on with another team, and there was like a revenue share agreement there, and the game had done well. And with that money, I could employ one artist, Jared Lunt, who we were making a different game, like a mobile game, because the success I'd had been on mobile, and we jammed now and then. So there was a Ludum Dare competition on a weekend, and we started making Broforce, and it just was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun making it. The sort of the temperature in the room was like everyone was excited, and then the people who played it were excited, and then we just kept developing it for a little bit and realized this is way better. It's going way further. We're having way more fun than what we had been investing in for the last 6 months. So we're canceling that, working on Broforce now. And it was a kind of easy decision. It was kind of weird because there'd been a couple people whose work you're kind of throwing away at that point. But it definitely worked. It was definitely the right call in hindsight. There was one guy, I guess the third employee at Free Lives, who was hired to work on the mobile game, and then ended up on his first day. It's like, no, there's a different game. It's Broforce. I hope you're happy with that. And it just kept showing potential as it went. It was one of those Jonathan Blow, who a lot of people, I think, I don't know, he's got a weird reputation, but he has some very wise words now and then. He made this point about Braid when he was developing Braid, that he felt like there's an analogy to making games as to digging, when you're digging for treasure, and when you're on the right game, it feels like you're standing on a pile of gold. And when you dig, you come up with gold, and you just keep coming up with gold. And like so often in games, you feel like you're standing on, maybe there's some gold down there, but there's a lot of dirt. What we're digging up right now is definitely dirt. We're hoping to reach the gold, but with something like Broforce or Jonathan's experience with Braid, the experience really was we know we're on the right track because everything we do we're on the right track, and we're the right team because everything we do is making this game a little bit better, and we can see very visible, very grokkable signs of that. Like there'd be people getting more and more excited, and then the team grows around that. We need someone to handle marketing. We need an additional programmer. We need more animation help, and and then it turned out it exceeded our expectations.
Yeah, I mean, I read that you retreated to the Mauritius for 3 months after Broforce, which was interesting. You called it Game Jam Island, if I read correctly. So, yeah. But by the way, I mean, to the extent that you can talk about it, how is it to be on the Devolver?
It has changed over the years. Obviously, we got in with Broforce, which is like we know them from 2013 onwards. So that's the days where they didn't have money to offer two developers to help fund games at all. Like they fund whole projects, and they're a publicly traded company. So there's there's differences, but the people that are there, mostly it's still the same people. There's only one or two people that left over the years. They're lovely people. Like I like them as friends, as people. That's how we chose Devolver. It was. Well, I suppose this is okay. I'm going to probably say too much, but given that this is episode 69, it's appropriate.
Okay.
We met. We had Broforce as a game. It had a few reviews at that point, like some journalists had written about it. Quite a lot of players. We knew we were going to do this thing. We were searching for a publisher. We were in South Africa. We didn't want to. We wanted to find someone that had a relationship with Steam and Valve and could do the marketing for us. And so there were a whole bunch of publishers that we spoke to, and Devolver weren't necessarily the cheapest option. They were, but we knew that they were a good cultural fit when Nigel Lowry almost immediately made a joke about how erect his penis was about the video game.
Perfect.
He didn't phrase it quite in those words, but
All right.
I'm making it a little more explicit, but the point was, I was like, okay, this is a cultural fit, and he opens with a joke, and he's an incredibly funny man, and that's also part of why Devolver has this like coolness around him. It's him and other people, but like Nigel's sense of humor is kind of incredible, and it's they made it easy for us.
Yeah, and I do get that they have the kind of nice relationship with every development team and such. So of course they will differ, but
And we're a studio that we've been happy with them, but we're also a studio that generally does not actually want to do that part of the work. I mean, we'll see what the years hold, but like we just want to make games. Like, we don't want to incorporate a lot of extra people to run the business side of it, because we don't actually want those people in the room to some extent.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm.
It's like we do one thing well, and we think when we do it well enough, and a lot of that is about like keeping it playful. If you put a marketing person in the room, they're going to immediately think about the marketing, and they should be in the room because you want it to be this family, but you can't have a family where we don't let the marketing people, the marketing guy, not allowed in the rooms when we talk about any potential game project, because he makes it sad for us because he mentions addressable markets or whatever.
But also as a marketer, I know that often your job is to try and make a consistent tone of voice and such, and maybe this is a little bit risky, maybe let's not go there. So it kind of takes the playfulness away from it. So it's a good choice.
Look, the right market. No, this is not to knock marketing people, but the right person. I don't know. We'd probably hire them and love to have them in the room. But it is a thing of like we're trying to do this one thing really well and hone in on a process that allows us to keep repeating it. And so part of our decision was, and it could in theory change over time, but to really just focus on the development and keep a sort of an eye on that and the things we want to make, rather than focusing too much on how we're going to sell it or anything like that.
Exactly. Okay.
To maybe jump back. We have a little bit of the advantage in South Africa that South Africa's Cape Town, where I live, beautiful place. It's got a proper city. There aren't lions roaming around. It's like it's an actual place. There's technology here, but the just to dispel some people's idea of what being like, in case anyone thought it wasn't civilized, it's pretty civilized.
Developing game with lions, I don't think so.
But it's kind of cheap here compared to being in a city. Compared to say being in San Francisco, it's like a quarter of the price. The living conditions, the rent, the food, and it means that we came into Broforce sold very well, and we came into what I think would be a good amount of money for any studio, but for us, it was even more because we'd kind of been so cheap leading up to the launch, and it meant that we really weren't under any kind of for a good long while, we wouldn't be under financial pressure. So we could kind of now do things the way we wanted. So we took the whole studio, computers, chairs, everything, went to Mauritius for 3 months. Thought we could make games there. This is after finishing Broforce. At this point, Genital Jousting has actually started. Because, well, given the nature of this episode, I do want to say, before I start talking about Genital Jousting, that I think 69 is one of the worst sex positions, if not the worst.
But yeah.
As much as it's an honor to be here on your 69th episode,
But
it's a dubious
I think
honor.
we share that. It's more like the thematic nature of it, but it's not like
so Genital Jousting. One of the guys who worked on Broforce, Richard Peterson, who then also worked on Genital Jousting with me. He had this kind of fascination with adult games in a sense, or adult themes in games, and that's not like let's make them super gory and like like just violence or grossness, things not for kids, but more what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? What are the things that you can talk about in games that don't often get discussed? And sexuality being a big part of that. His origin story for that, I think he would tell. I might be butchering that, but he'd gone to an all-boys school that really hadn't been quite like repressive about sex. And he was interested in this, and he was playing around with it. So he made a game called Wang Commander that was like it was these like physical penises on a sort of 2D plane wobbling around. You could kind of control them, and they would tumble. There'd be some sort of sports ball, and there'd be a goal, and the goal was, I think, at least thematically sort of meant to be like this is maybe a sperm bouncing in, and this is kind of it's a penis, and then everyone would spray psychedelic semen everywhere. It was a fun game.
in itself it's a pretty bonkers idea, I would say.
So I'm getting to that. Here was the interesting thing. So this was we had these meetups, Cape Town meetups, game developers would get together at the Microsoft offices in town, and on a projector, we'd play games made by the local community. So Wang Commander comes up, and it gets played. People laugh. It's funny, and then people leave the projector room because there's snacks outside. We're going to eat our pizza or whatever it was. And what interested me was the people who hung around playing Wang Commander were women. It wasn't. So that's a little surprising, right? Like you think, oh, it's a game about penises. The people who want to play this are the men, and potty humor, men draw penises on things. It seems like that's the way it would be, but those weren't the people who were the most fascinated by it. It was, in this case, the female game developers from the community that seemed to enjoy it the most.
Interesting.
And it's a sports ball game as well. So that got me interested. There was something that wasn't how we normally talked about these things. At least there was something surprising there. I didn't get to it immediately. I did draw a picture on a wall which went something like there were 4 penises stacked in each other, and I thought that seems like a good idea. I will make this at some point. It was sitting up on a wall in the Broforce office for a while.
Okay.
But much later, at an 8-hour game jam in Berlin, put like this concept together. What if the penises? We're just gonna have penises, and we can still have. And if Wang Commander was missing anything, it was that the penises weren't fucking. There's this other part to it where you're knocking a ball around. If you're going to do a penis, the thing people want to do is do penetration.
Yeah. Obviously.
So we made that in 8 hours, and that particular game jam now has a rule that you have to tell people if there's going to be adult content.
Oh, okay.
They would
Did it get
release-
started with yours?
Yes.
Okay.
They made the rule right after that. I was like, okay, we have a problem.
Good to know. Okay.
But people really reacted, and the moment that it became a commercial project was when a video of it had kind of got sort of leaked almost, or a journalist from Killscreen wrote about genital jousting because she'd seen it at a party, and I'd made, it wasn't a trailer, it was just some gameplay footage, just so she could explain what this thing was. And that got 1 million views on YouTube. And then we were like, oh, well, we kind of have to actually make this now.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit, to bring it a little bit back to, say, Broforce, that is a little bit of our methodology, where we are looking for outside sources of validation. And this seemed like it. We, I think, announced we were going to do it, and then based on that video, and we said we were going to actually make this game, that's when Twitch banned us. We didn't have a game yet. The game hadn't come up.
Oh, not even had the game.
The game was barely in development at this point, and Twitch banned us already. So
just
we have
out of
out of spite, I think.
Out of spite, but also because I know. I mean, apart from some things that I read about early development highlights, and I quote, you were talking about ball to shaft ratio and butthole attraction force, which the butthole attraction force I do remember from playing Genital Jousting. It was very magnetic, I would say.
There's a point of no return, definitely. There was an early version of the game that was called Magnetic Assholes.
All right, okay.
But it got called Genital Jousting because it didn't even have a title. I gave the Killscreen journalist a list of names what it could be called, and she said Genital Jousting was the best name, so it got called that.
It's an alliteration. It's fun, and so it does sound nice. Yeah. But beyond all of that, again, out of spite, Twitch banned it because I feel like there are some. I have some questions here around Genital Jousting, but a lot of people don't realize, and I had this feeling, a lot of people don't realize that that, pun intended, it goes way deeper than it seems on the surface. Because one of the things that I read up on is the role of consent in the development of Genital Jousting. Like, for me, it was an enlightening thing to realize the fact that you guys thought about the role of consent in there. Like, you couldn't just go around and fuck every penis in existence. There was actually a mechanic implemented at some point. And why do you think that was important to you, and how did you land on the winning idea?
I mean, consent's important.
Of course.
So it's important to us, but we fixated. This is to some extent, and I don't think we necessarily do it differently now, but it was happening in sort of 2016, 2017. This is kind of newly Trump's first America thing. People are very concerned about like female productive rights being rolled back, and that's the climate going on in the online space. So we knew we had to be careful in that way. But I think I don't want to say we did it out of cowardice either. Like our true selves would have flagrantly defied this. Like it's no the. I think I was reading listening to a podcast recently speculating that a lot of the tech billionaires probably played SimCity or games like that. There was a tech billionaires or Silicon Valley reading list put out recently, and it kind of, you can see that they read things, a lot of like great man mythology, that kind of thing. But there's if you look at it, you might, the person was speculating, you still might see an influence that isn't mentioned in the reading list, where perhaps these tech startup type people have played a lot of video games that have given them this very kind of compound interest, kind of a systemic way of thinking. Like we will invest aggressively at the beginning and it will grow. And this is what you do in something like SimCity. People pick up these patterns, these kind of programs from playing video games. And this is where putting in consent as like an important step is, it was an important thing to make. It's just one little piece, one little influence, not one little, a game doesn't necessarily change the way a person thinks, but you can normalize certain patterns of behavior. And we would choose to make, consent a like a notable moment in the game. Like you when you join, you also consent. We wanted enthusiastic consent to be a thing that we kind of allowed people to perform. Like, and it's kind of funny. It's like, okay, we're all going to be penises. I consent to this. It's I consent to being a penis and you putting your penis in my asshole. That's it's a fun thing to do, but it's a pattern that is a good thing to encourage.
Yeah, and sex is supposed to be fun for both parts, so it's that's the message underneath, I would suppose.
And it worked through with the scoring system of the initial game. Like the initial version of the game was all multiplayer, and you would get a point for penetrating, but also a point for being penetrated. You couldn't win the game if you weren't enthusiastically offering up your asshole to other people, or other players. Which was important because the game we didn't want to make was a game about trying to unconsensually enter someone. Which would, if you put the scoring of just the penetrator gets everything, gets all the points, then you have this game where people are trying to avoid having sex, and it's something else. Then it's not something we would have wanted to stand behind.
Yeah, and it also sends the wrong message, I think. Yeah.
So there was a lot of thought about this, because it is in a small way, this is an example of pioneering something. Dubious on it, but like there aren't that many games that allow you to have sex with each other, and we couldn't just look at an example and go, this is how they made their game about being an anthropomorphic penis and having sex with your friends.
Exactly. It's one of a kind in a lot of ways.
Well, there is another game coming out that involves having sex with your friends. I should mention, because we're making it. I won't say too much, but there's a project in the studio that is a bit more like full-sized. In this case, imagine full-sized humans, but with all of the motor skills of genital jousting, trying to perform different sex acts on each other.
Oh, right. So like all that kind of ragdolly physics, I suppose, something like that.
A little bit like Mount Your Friends, but lying on a floor trying to mount.
Okay. All right, interesting. Okay, yeah. Looking forward to that, I guess.
It's coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, no, interesting. And you did mention that you had something in the pipeline, indeed. Just something to clarify for me, because couldn't find consistent information everywhere. Stick it to the stick, man.
So that is also. I mean, all of these are teams. So
of course, all teams. Yeah.
But in the case of Broforce and Genital Jousting and Stick It to the Stick Man, I have a pivotal role in starting these projects.
Yeah. And I like that I love that you put yours in quotes, because one of the things that you mentioned is that games are like a collective effort. It's about teamwork. It's about all of that, and it's something I wanted to touch on right now, because I feel like you guys have a very, very unique process in the way that you make games. I feel like the games that you make often start from absurd and chaotic ideas, like even Broforce can be defined that way, and then somehow end up making powerful statements. Even Broforce itself about masculinity, it ridicules the figure of the action hero of the 90s and such. And in America, you have the American flag as a checkpoint. I mean, that's pretty much explicit satire. So would you say there is a method to the madness in Free Lives, or is madness the method?
Uh, I mean, it's both. It's both.
Uh-huh.
Because there's definitely when we've had studio visits by other studios and they've looked around, there's been a bit of this shouldn't work. What are you doing? But obviously, it does
Uh,
work.
yeah.
Because we've made it work. But I think that the method is it's not madness though. But it is there are few rules or
Hmm.
fewer traditional rules. There is a an intention to keep things uh, as playful and creative as possible for certainly during ideation phases. And we do get serious because we have to finish games, and
Yeah.
you can't just be playful. Um, but we also do. It's also it limits the things that we can do. In the sense that we don't really want to have teams that are bigger than 10 people. As soon as you have 10 people, uh, you can't really have a discussion in the room, and there'll be voices that just can't make it in, and there'll be a need for extra layers of management and oversight and that kind of thing. I mean, we do 10. I say 10 people. Like towards the end of our projects, we do occasionally reach that kind of number, but at that
Hmm.
point, things are kind of moving in a direction, and it's easy to kind of bring on some contractors to help with parts of the project that don't necessarily involve changing or altering the project at that point. Just kind of getting the content that needs to be made. But we're we're close to what I think Valve kind of famously had that handbook where they were like, it's a flat kind of culture. And obviously, because they're a big company, it wasn't flat, or it certainly isn't flat now. And they're adjusting to the problems of being, maybe that was their aspiration, and maybe it worked for a little while in some places, but it couldn't work with the team sizes that they have. It just doesn't,
Hmm.
it's just not possible.
You need
Um,
structure at some point. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, when you've got that many people, because you can't just fly in every direction.
Yeah.
But when you've got 6 people in a room, you can chat through most problems and kind of get that kind of you know an actual true kind of brainstorm where everyone weighs in and the best ideas win, and everyone can talk to each other often enough that they have this a similar vision in their head, which as soon as you have 10 people, you can't maintain that. So people are offering ideas that don't fit with the vision, and then you have to stop everything, explain where the vision is because they don't have it in their heads. And the more people you add, the more likely it's going to be that the more of this kind of exponential communication overhead kind of happens. And the other limiting thing is that we really can't do what we do remotely.
Yeah, of
It
course.
doesn't work because we need the people in the room, because
Hmm.
we're trying to make projects where in a meaningful way everyone's contributing to the ideas. That doesn't mean there isn't effectively leadership, in the sense that someone might need to call the shot on a specific thing, but in theory they're synthesizing the best ideas and choosing the best ideas rather than behaving like an auteur.
Yeah.
um, and but there's even less structure at the early phases. You
Hmm.
mentioned Game Jam Island.
Yeah.
That wasn't as game jammy as we hoped. I think there's been better. It had maybe more structure than we should have had. We've tried different versions of this. We went to Bali at some point to make
Uh,
games, and then tried to make a new game like every 2 weeks for multiple teams making a new game every 2 weeks. We made kind of awesome work, but it was stressful, and
yeah, of course.
it didn't kind of nothing we made there was truly great,
Hmm.
and which is everyone looks back on that as like a negative time in at the studio. It's like that was really stressful, and like there was no air
Didn't quite
conditioning,
work.
and it didn't quite work. But we still, I mean, I think we showed a lot of talent, but there's a difference between just having that raw talent and like really finding the magic.
Yeah, of course.
And the magic for us seems to happen often when we're like, just make whatever, have a laugh, and then
And
something comes out of
and,
it.
and yeah, and that's interesting because I know that you value game jams in general. I mean, Broforce obviously came out of Ludum Dare, but yeah, you do value game jams as a way for people to experiment with ideas and such. And I know that you guys do a lot of prototypes and see basically what sticks and what has the most absurd reactions or generates the most laughs or something. And that brings me to the next point, which is you mentioned that you're not playful all the time and you have to be serious sometimes. But I feel like I think you mentioned this somewhere at some point. You like being serious about playfulness. So you like having humor that lets players drop their guard, and then you can slip in something deeper through the
Right.
back door. So,
Yeah.
so how do you actually balance that, like the comedy, the critique side, especially in something like Genital Jousting? I suppose that was a little bit more tricky. So how did you actually tackle that?
We very, this was the thing we were thinking about a lot during Genital Jousting. And there was a kind of story mode to Genital Jousting. It kind of it follows a part of a life of a penis named John who is alone, kind of sad, and he's looking for love in all the wrong places. He thinks that having more stuff or having a better job will bring him love and happiness. And the problem is he's kind of an asshole, as it were. Uh, so we wanted to tell this kind of serious message about the masculinity where we often uh, adopt from culture around us doesn't necessarily offer a great script for finding happiness or finding love. And you see this a lot in incel culture where people are
Yeah.
angry and like they're mean, and it's they're very online, and they have all these terrible ideas of what will make them make someone respect or love them, and
Yeah.
and pick up culture and this kind of thing. And it's kind of, if it was a strategy in a game, it would be this like degenerate strategy where it's like
Uh-huh.
maybe you achieve the one thing, but like you're sort of making everything worse
Yeah.
by doing this. Like everything
Hmm.
gets worse. Like gender relation. If everyone starts behaving like this, gender relations just fall apart. Like this is,
Yeah.
you know,
Obviously.
it might work, even if it works for you, which I'm skeptical of. We don't want everyone doing this because what would happen?
Yeah.
But people absorb this, and they so we wanted to counter that with a bit of a story about a path to maybe a more positive version of masculinity. But that's kind of, if you tell someone, and then we were like, well, we don't want to tell people that. If you tell someone,
Yeah.
hey, I'm about to try change your mind, they're like, okay, my guard's
Yeah.
up,
That
give me your
exactly.
best
Yeah.
shot. So we were looking into this a lot. Laughter is, if you can genuinely make someone laugh, it tends to make people more receptive to the message or possibly the next message. We were thinking about this a lot, like we're trying to tell jokes, and because it's a story mode, it does have these canned jokes as you go, and this is funny, and then there's like maybe a sad moment, or like funny, 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 and we would just literally space that out. Like we don't have enough jokes here, because we
Mm.
wanted people to feel like the game was a friend, and we do think that, like, I do think anyway, people's relationships with games can be a bit like parasocial in that way, where
Uh-huh.
you can like a game, you can be like, I love this game, and it's like kind of like, I love this game because the things it says are cool or whatever. I think it's not quite. I mean, I don't think people think of games as people, but I think a game can earn trust. Probably a TV show, any other piece of media can earn trust, and then
Mm-hmm.
our theory was we could expend that trust by then trying to like nudge people into this, is like, maybe consider this thing in a sad way now. Like maybe it wasn't a great idea to talk about yourself all the time and like coerce your coworker into going on a date with you, and maybe that's not great. You
Yeah.
I don't know. It was an interesting project to take on. I'm still not 100% certain if our approach worked. I think our approach was quite like I mean, I'm proud of what we made. At the same time, I think it's a hard problem to kind of
Yeah.
make something that's funny and tries to change someone's mind. But every now and then we would get a kind of review where someone would kind of feel seen by this, or feel like
Uh-huh.
they used to be like that, and this kind of I don't think there were a lot of necessary people realizing in that moment going, oh, and now I'm gonna
Yeah.
stop listening to pickup artists. I don't think
Yeah,
that necessarily.
to
I
pick
mean,
up artists after playing a game about penises. Wow,
yeah.
the genital jousting changed my life. I mean, some people might, but
Yeah,
yeah,
you never get to really see what is in your players' heads.
of course.
But there were people who did feel touched by the messages,
Uh-huh.
and that was really gratifying.
Yeah.
It was a very interesting journey. Like I say, we were on, especially Richard, but I think Robbie and myself, we were on this kind of journey of like, what do we really want to say about this? And John, who was our writer, John Keevy, he,
It was the same name
you
as
know,
the protagonist. Interestingly, I just made
he
a
did
connection.
he did not like that. He wanted to call him something else. We all voted it was going to be called John.
But yeah, I mean, you raise some important points there, because the good old problem of the echo chamber, like speaking to young men and toxic males as well, it feels like banging your head against a brick wall most of the times, or even your entire body against the brick wall. They just don't want to listen. So yeah, it's an interesting approach, the one you got, and I do believe that it works in some ways, because humor does help you lower your defenses,
Mm.
and helps you build trust with the game or whatever you're experiencing, and then you can actually send the message. I've seen it
Yeah.
happen in some games and some works of art.
Yeah,
Groundhog Day, for example, is a very funny movie,
mm,
but it does have a very deep message underneath, and it
yeah.
just sends it through humor.
Mm.
So yeah, it's a
The,
very very good approach.
the theory of the theory one of the theories about why humor came about, like there's some, because there's mean humor as well, but where you just laugh at someone, but the
Yeah.
part of it, perhaps what early humor was a lot of this mean humor where it's like, look at that tribe, they're really stupid, they don't have very nice caves, or
Hmm.
whatever, like they're and look at how different they are, and we're all laugh about that, and that because we're all laughing about that, we know we're on the same side. So when you're laughing with something, it has some of that effect. It has some of this. We're on the same side, but I mean, laughter and humor is still very poorly understood. It feels like one of those happy accidents. Like we could have lived in a world. It's not. It probably didn't help us like hunt woolly mammoths better, or whatever the actual survival skills were. It's like there's one of these soft, kind of happy accident things that humans have that I think makes us interesting. But we could have lived in a world where no one has a sense of humor. Like that was,
Yeah.
I think, a very real possibility for humanity.
Yeah, in a way, it's a social skill, isn't it? Like it's
Mm,
bonding together, and that does augment the chances of survival for us
yeah,
humans, especially.
yeah.
So, in a way, it is related, I would say. So, yeah.
Uh,
You mentioned like some reviews and reactions to genital jousting. What would you think has been the most memorable one that you've seen? Not just for genital jousting necessarily; it could be for any other game.
Yeah, I think. I mean, the one that like, uh, you know, we've been at this a while. There's been a lot of reactions, and uh, and just you miss most of them as well,
Yeah.
because a lot of it's happening on Twitter or wherever, Facebook, some social media platform that like I'm not actively following, or but the Steam, I think for most of our games, Steam reviews have been quite lovely. Um, it's like, I don't know. I think some developers talk about toxic Steam communities. I've certainly heard that, and like I've never really experienced that. In Genital Jousting, you'd expect some toxicity to come up, but a lot of it was like, this game is terrible because gays are bad kind of stuff. And it was, really gross. And then there'd be a whole community of people saying, no, this, you're wrong. Like we should include everyone kind of,
Yeah.
and please leave, you bigot,
Yeah,
like that kind of
exactly.
thing. And that was always nice. I mean, if I'm gonna brag about a really pleasant reaction. There was, while, I guess soon after the launch of Broforce or during early access, someone wrote in to say they had a friend who was suicidal, and they'd just spent time playing Broforce with this friend, and
Mm.
you know, who knows how the friend's life has turned out, but that person was just, thank you for making this game that is like making my friend happy, and that's like the best you can hope for, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So saving someone's life with a game, with your
Yeah.
game,
Well,
that's
I don't want to
well,
say we
don't know if it
specific.
happened, but
Yeah.
helping at least in
Yeah.
that
I mean,
way. So yeah,
and
it's,
you know, you hope that's what happens with the games you make. You hope
yeah.
that it's bringing joy, and that was that's been an amazing privilege. Like, I tend to tell people, like, if I was actually, if I was more charismatic, I'd probably be a stand-up comedian or something like that. I like to make people laugh. I don't.
Mhm.
I'm not. I wouldn't be good as a stand-up comedian, but like, I would see that as a very gratifying profession. Instead, I've got technical skills and like the ability to talk to other people who are talented, who have technical skills, to come together and make these games. And like, just entertaining people is kind of, for me, that's what, you know that's what makes me happy. It's
Mhm.
And so yeah, I'm lucky, and there's a lot of people that have loved our games. Um, some more than others. Sometimes you make something and you wish people had the best time with it, and they don't, and that's
Mhm.
hard, right? Or sometimes they have a decent time, but like, really, I've been blessed with a game with a few of our games where people have had amazing times with them.
And and I feel like you attracted the right community there, which is tough with a game like Genital Justing, because you could have attracted the absolute opposite of what you
Yeah,
wanted, but you actually did it. And I remember the reactions. Even at the time, I was reviewing games for like an Italian website when Genital Justing came out. I think I reviewed the game, or I helped another reviewer review, and we played it the multiplayer together. And everybody was laughing at me for how much I loved Genital Jousting and the fact that it seemed fun, and that it probably had some other message underneath. And so look at that, I was right. So yeah, but it doesn't get to everyone. It doesn't.
yeah,
Some people stop at the surface layer and they're like, oh yeah, it's a game about floppy dicks. And like, but there's a lot more to it, and there's a
yeah.
lot more to all of the games that you make. They're not just action games, not just fun multiplayer games. There is something underneath. Like
Yeah,
there's a
the
clear design vision. That's something I like.
I was speaking. I don't know if you know the developer Zavalier from Strange Scaffold. He's been
No.
he's been doing interviews recently.
Okay.
He came to Cape Town at the end of last year, and we were talking a little bit about how his process works versus what we're doing at Free Lives. He's a great interview subject if you could get the opportunity to talk to
Yeah.
him, and a very interesting guy. But he really does have a kind of a vision. He doesn't necessarily, you'd want to speak to him. I don't want to put too many words in his mouth, but one of the things that is different at Free Lives and most of our projects, not necessarily 100% all of them, but we're putting the thing out quite early. So something like Broforce or Genital Jousting exists as a thing people are playing on day one or day three, and we're using feedback to improve the game. And this is talked about a lot during games, but it can have some effects which are a little strange. Um, so Zavalier doesn't really listen to player feedback.
Hmm.
He plays the game, and the developers play the game, and he's listening to feedback. It's not like but he's not doing like an early access process where you're like, and you hear this from a lot of early access developers, like, thank you community, we have crafted the game with your help. And obviously, the earlier you're putting something out there, the sooner you're getting this information back. And in a greater way, it's shaping the game. So something like Broforce, there was an intention to lampoon America. Like, I'm from South Africa. We don't really have a military. We got rid of our nuclear bombs, like in the 80s or whenever it was. One of the few nations to ever really just go like, we're pacifist. Like, South Africa has a lot of problems, but like, attempting military interventions in other countries isn't one of them. And so like the American imperialism looks kind of odd from a South African perspective, and American films that portray this kind of imperialism relatively unquestioningly looks kind of odd from a South African perspective, because like our perspective is like, we don't fight our neighbors, we don't fight anyone, we just like we got our own problem, we're trying to we're trying to figure out post-apartheid South Africa, and that's like, it's hard enough, but we don't need to invade someone to secure something. And I'm not saying there's no point in any country ever having a military, but the portrayal of American imperialism in video games, especially in video games, but in films too, and especially in those great man action hero kind of films, like Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger just going into a foreign country to murder like 150 men to like save his daughter or whatever. It's not quite American imperialism, but there's this thing of like, America goes and just conquers with commandos, and it's and obviously a film like South Park's Team America World Police plays this up very much. But the point I'm getting to is my vision a little bit for Broforce early on was quite a negative portrayal of America. Like, I'm satirizing it. There's American flags you're raising. There was a question in the studio about, like, do we make them American flags, or is that like too on the nose? Will people get upset because we're criticizing America too hard? Was a genuine discussion very early on, and then if you watch what like sort of happens, we're working with a lot of French players early on, but like quite a lot of Americans too. Both of these audiences responded really well to these sort of lone hero kind of narratives, and what they're responding to starts shaping what we make. And the final version of Broforce has it has like satire in it. It is clearly a silly. There's a little bit of there's some written jokes that are very clearly kind of there's a joke which I wonder how this is aged, because there's a mission in Ukraine, or in the area around about Ukraine, and I think the line that the general says when you're considering visiting it is, Ukraine more like our crane, which it's I don't know. I look back on that one like, oh, that's a bit on the nose, maybe. But the certainly my vision might have been a bit more negative about American imperialism, and the game ends up being as much more like it's a loving parody, and it really focused on the movies in the end, much less the politics. And that was a fine place to land, but it wasn't necessarily my instinct entirely. It was my instinct filtered through an audience. And so someone like Xalavier doesn't have that, isn't listening to the audience to try figure out where their vision is leading. And I think inevitably the way we're developing games, we can't be that, well, we aren't maybe that precious about the vision. The vision exists is, these intents we talked about with Genital Jousting, or intents in Broforce to play up masculinity, to lampoon a bit of American interventionism, but then it goes through this filter of what do people actually respond to.
Exactly. Well, in the end, games end up in the hands of players, so they are the end. Yeah.
It absolutely makes sense, but yeah. So then the point I guess just pushing back against is I don't want to. It's not an auteur process. There are these intentions. Like I find it funny when people when people mock masculinity. Like I've always found this an ample source of humor. There's a South African prototype at the moment called Get Yoked, which is a deck builder about bodybuilding, where you just buff up your arms and your butt and your pecs, and it's literally been in development 4 weeks or whatever. It's it's a very small janky game, but it fills me with endless joy to see this kind of manly pursuit just go to its like horrific logical extent, and it really is horrific. This is what I find funny, and I do love satire. Like I'm a big Mike Judge fan. Like I love films like Don't Look Up and like these.
Love that.
Like this is the cinema I enjoy, and there's a lot of satire in games, but there's very few studios I can look to that will be as biting as something like Mike Judge does. So we're trying to fill that space a little bit.
Yeah. I think you guys are doing it. Yeah.
Oh, there's a weird statistic on Steam. If you do a kind of analysis of tags, so people do this when they're like, what type of game should I make? How does base building games do? Like, what are the average sales? It looks like almost no games get the parody tag. Broforce doesn't have a prominent parody tag for whatever reason. None of our games, I think, do. But the games that do almost universally are very successful. It's like a strange. I don't understand this data. I think there's something there that people, when they really see a parody, they're amazingly enthused about it. But
I think they're hooked because parodies tend to have, well, it could be one of the reasons, but parodies tend to have like a real life hook, real life counterpart or something. And that usually, if it's I suppose Steam applies the parody tag for something that is quite evidently parody. And so people can see that connection. And so maybe that's what makes them more successful. Who knows?
It must have mean that, I presume it has also meant that it made people laugh. Like it wouldn't be there if people weren't laughing. But Broforce, I don't know. Maybe it's not a parody. Steam doesn't think it's a parody. Steam users don't think it's a parody. Maybe America is just that cool, and on the path to kill Satan, which
Yes, absolutely. Maybe it is. Well, Evan, we're almost at time. Well, I'd say we're over time, but still have the last few questions for you. We are towards the end.
I'll try to go a little quicker.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine if we have a longer episode every once in a while. And it was an absolutely beautiful chat. So I think we're at the time where I usually ask some questions around reflection. And this is my favorite question. I ask it to every single developer that comes on the show. And why are you a game developer? What drives you forward? What is the core motivation?
I think I've already answered that to some
I think
extent.
so, yeah.
Like I'm really into entertaining people, and like I said, like this is my path to doing it. If I was an artist, I thought for a little while I might be. It would be funny, cartoons I was drawing. Like it would be entertaining in some way. If I was a writer, it would be Terry Pratchett-like books, hopefully. But I'm not that good a writer. But I can make games, so I get to do it this way. And I've had luck, and I think I like people enough, like on an interpersonal level as well. Like there was a point I wanted to bring up when we were first talking about doing this interview, which was a little bit about collective intelligence. I've been thinking a lot about this recently, just that I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing that anyone makes games. I don't think human brains, are actually good at. Well, they can't, in fact, simulate games at all. In your head, you can't. We apply associative logic to formulate ideas, not simulated logic. And it's amazing we make games anyway. And I think uh, this I think a lot of it only comes about because uh, people are striking above their intelligence level. I think the right team can make something better than the individual members would have been able to, even if they'd just been able to dream it. Even if they'd just been
Mm-hmm.
dreaming, there were no technical obstacles in their way. They could just make exactly what they wanted. The individual members often will make a worse game than if
Like that, yeah.
than they could in the right team. Because
Mm-hmm.
and there's science behind that. Like a good
Yeah.
team can strike can almost double the intelligence of the average member in terms of their problem solving ability. And that's kind of incredible. So there's this, when it's like picking up that gold off the floor, there's just something magical about it. Um, that I've had very few experiences like that elsewhere in life. It's just that feeling that you're doing good work.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of wonderful.
And I've got an episode coming up coming up. I think it will be released just before this one, with someone online that goes by the name of Gaming Anthropologist, and we were talking about the importance of play. We were talking about how it is not necessarily a survival skill, but play is something that we do. It's something that we need on a very very human level. And when people get together and they are better than the sum of their parts, it's just magic, as you say. It's picking
Yeah,
that magic off the floor, and it creates something incredible.
yeah.
So yeah, well, you did mention some development, well, not development challenges, but like you did mention that there were some instances in which, of course, working on prototypes and such, you had to scrap things. You had to
Yeah.
just go through some obstacles and whatnot. What would you say was the toughest part of this journey so far, of your journey as a group, but also yours maybe so far, and how did you push through it?
Some of the challenges are teamwork, as
Yeah.
well, because like I like people, like I say, but like uh,
Yeah.
people can get on your nerves, but also you can get on their nerves. Like I
Yeah,
think
and
I
you
think
did mention like the being in the same room helps you solve problems. Like
yeah.
having smaller teams helps you solve problems better. So I'm curious about what how you solve those problems specifically. Yeah.
It always feels like you're discovering a new problem. I mean, people are so
Yeah.
complicated. So you're trying to work out, like you would work out dynamics in a video game to try
Hmm.
get the experience you want. You're now got this even more complicated process of like two people who have this dynamic. It could be their communication style. Just it could be, um, it could be something. It, it, yeah, it's usually like everyone wants the same thing, and then someone's feeling underappreciated or locked out or whatever it is, and you've got to figure out how to get around that. And
Hmm.
um, so there's a lot of like emotional intelligence type challenges.
Yeah.
The the I don't have, and that's hard, and it always feels like it's a new problem as well. It's like you can't just solve it once and be like, now we're perfect.
Yeah.
It's like there's going to be a new
Yeah. It
team.
will come up again, of
Yeah,
course. Yeah.
they're eventually going to get tired and stressed and something, and
Hmm.
it's. But we've got a couple people at the studio who are very emotionally intelligent, and we always try sit and figure it out. And it's never great when it happens. Game development attracts certain types of people, and I
Hmm.
think because of its nature, and because it's a lot of people who make games are like these, and it make them successfully are like these kind of alien species type people. They got like there's it might be an artist who is in the top 1% of people who can draw this kind of art or whatever, but like they're my wife often tells me Evan, you make such great games because you're not good at anything else.
Yeah.
And I think that's
I've heard
true
that
of.
before. Yeah.
That's a bit true of game developers. So that's and then it's hard. You've got these kind of alien people who uh, uh, yeah, they're generally. I mean, I don't want to say everyone's an alien, but generally someone's very strong in one direction. There's some kind of flaws that come with them, and this goes for myself as well. Um,
Mhm.
the I had I think most probably the most traumatic experience I had was discussing profit share. Um, I think it's a hard one for any studio, any developer to figure out how to divide up the hopeful fortunes.
Mhm.
Um, the it is a case where suddenly you're going from we're all a team to actually our interests diverge. Um,
Mhm.
and I think the hardest, the most like unpleasant experience I ever had was trying to kind of renegotiate a profit share that had been poorly negotiated at the start. The project had changed shape.
Yeah,
The
of course. Mhm.
person, the profit share that had been offered meant everyone else who had come on more recently really couldn't be offered a fair deal, um, and it just got messy. It was horrible,
Yeah,
and
of course.
we have a different system of profit share now that kind of works essentially just track people's time, including
Uh-huh.
contractors, and some people's time is valued a little bit higher, but essentially you're paid out based on how long you worked on the thing multiplied
Yeah.
by how critical your contribution was.
Yeah.
In
Mhm.
terms of the value of your time, and that kind of came about because of this traumatic experience where we tried
Of course.
a fixed percentage and kind of lost a friend.
Oh,
It was bad.
yeah. I mean, that's money is always a big player in those kind of dynamics, unfortunately.
Yeah,
But you have a new structure now, and hopefully that works for you guys. Hopefully, no more
yeah,
friends lost.
yeah.
Uh,
No, because like I say, I mean to some extent, I mean I don't want to speak for everyone at Free Lives, but I think a lot of us feel like it's a bunch of friends making games a lot of the time. And we try to keep it that way. And that's part of what you said about playfulness being an important part of people's experience. It's not just because it can potentially lead to great games, and I think it can, but it's also because uh, it's just being human. It's like a thing we need.
Well, I have only one last question for you, Evan, and then we are free, or you are free. I'd say I've been keeping you here for an hour and a half almost. So
I did warn you.
Oh no! It's fine. I had a
Okay.
lot of fun and it was a great chat, as I mentioned. So I would do it again. Maybe not right away, but I would do it again. This podcast is all about indie diaries, and this was your very own personal indie diary. So if this were your final diary entry, final at all, what's one message that you'd leave for for players or other fellow developers? I'll leave the choice to you.
We've covered so much ground already. A lot of the things
Uh
I'd
huh.
want to say, to do with playfulness. I think people look at our studio. I suppose I'm starting this off in a defensive way, but I'm going to try and get to the
Okay.
positive way.
Okay.
People look at our studio and occasionally will say something to the effect of, "It only works because you're successful already.
Mm.
Like you can only afford to be playful because you can actually afford to be playful." And I don't think that's I don't want to dismiss that. At the same time, the story I described with starting Broforce in the middle of another project that ended up being cancelled. That was an example of us not really. This is not a reasonable use of like money. This is not an example of like we actually had loads of money back then because we didn't, and we were being playful anyway. Um, so I think you can make excuses for why you're kind of not being playful. And I really think in terms of decision making, it can hurt you to kind of put these extra constraints. Like, we're not going to try for greatness. We're not going to try for the thing we feel like making. We're going to instead try to do something that's a bit of a safe bet. I mean, you see what's happening in, say, Hollywood, where
Yeah,
so
but
many
AAA development too.
reboots
Yeah.
and AAA development. Not that there isn't great stuff there, but a lot of it's very conservative in its in the new things it tries. Because their budgets are so big. And with indie games, that's not always the case. It certainly doesn't take a big budget to spend a weekend trying a new idea. So we're I don't think anyone in indie games is really in the position where they're like, we can't be playful. Um, it's if you're not doing that, it's a little bit like maybe it's in your head, and it might be because you're stressed. It might be because you need to know where your next paycheck's coming from, or worse, you need to know where the paycheck of someone else is coming from that you need to pay. And that's, I've been there. I haven't had to worry about that for a while, but I know what that was like, and it didn't. Fortunately, I just happened to be a relaxed person. It didn't get to my head, and I could play around. And then we made Broforce. Like, if I'd been more stressed, I don't think that would have happened. Or maybe if I'd just been a more reasonable person, that wouldn't have happened. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that the only other second thing I'd just say is, I think people often work under the illusion that everything would just turn out all right if they keep on working. And they're a little bit of like a head in the sand thing. And I think often when you're unhappy, you should stop and
the hustle
do something.
culture.
Yeah, because you can know there's a problem and be afraid to say it because it makes it real, and you don't know what comes. And often, like, we've had cases where we worked on a game for like 2 years and then we cancelled it, and it wasn't coming together, or it was going to just be too complicated to finish. And people actually felt happy at that point. What they felt was that they'd worked on it a year longer than they should have. And I think often it's like, kill it early. If you're not happy, look, I don't want to say, not everyone has the same brain chemistry, right? But like, if you know you're not happy for where you should be, there might be a problem here, and you should address that. You can't just sit on unhappiness. You can't sit on an interpersonal problem with a teammate. You have to,
and hope that it solves itself over time, because it won't. It will just get worse.
So you use. I like to think of it as like, if you pursue happiness, in some ways, you're safer. Like, you can use that as a kind of canary, because you often feel miserable before you really know how to fix it. But you kind of need to stop and start having that conversation.
Yeah. I think that's a very powerful point. And going back to the playfulness point that you made as well, very briefly, I think it connects to this one too. I mean, there's always the cult of the lamb argument. I mean, Massive Monster, I think that was their biggest game.
Yeah, biggest game. They've been making a lot of things before that.
And it's still pretty successful. I mean, and they were completely playful. I would say it's definitely their most successful game, based on all the social interactions and such. And it's completely playful. I mean, you don't have to reach enormous success first before you can be playful. Well, Evan, it's been a beautiful chat, beautiful episode together. An hour and a half is probably going to be. I don't think it's the longest episode, though. I've had longer before. So so that's perfectly fine. I loved talking about all these themes and diving into your creative process and how you work with the team. It's endlessly fascinating. I know a lot of people are going to love it. So it's time for some parting words now. Where can other people find you? And if they do, what is the best way to support you and the team?
These days, I would say, don't find me. Yeah, find free lives. They're great. No, I use social media just to communicate with fans of our games now. Just like that eats up. Because I could choose to, I don't know, be a presence on X or Blue Sky or something like that. But I don't want to spend time there, because I'm already spending time talking just to the people who are playing our games, and and it's very focused on the game. But I think from a mental health perspective, like, I'm happy there. I'm trying to please these people. They're sort of, they're like my friends. They presumably like me too, and it's makes the game better. It's comfortable. So I'm not out there in a social media way. And yeah, I would recommend that approach to more game developers.
Okay, perfect. Right, well then, I think that is a wrap. Thank you again so much for this chat. It was beautiful. And yeah, wishing you the best of luck with the next project. And I'm very much looking forward to it, because you can bet that I will talk about it on the show at some point. So yeah.
Yeah, call me back for Sex with Friends. I'll
okay, perfect. We'll do that. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.
All right, friends, and that's a wrap on episode 69, Indie Diary number 69, with Evan Greenwood, creative director and founder of Free Lives. Thank you, Evan, for being such an amazing guest. It was such a fun chat, honestly, and we were able to talk about, your time with Devolver Digital and all the games that you guys have been working on and all of that. Just so many interesting topics. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for this nice episode together and all the puns and everything else. I really wish you all the best. I can't wait for the next thing to come from Free Lives. Now, listeners, if you really enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show or leave a rating, 5 stars. Check out my social media. You can find all of the links in the description of the episode, as well as ways to find Free Lives online. So yeah, I recommend that you check them out because their games are always absolutely incredible. And if you want to support the show in any way, you can go on patreon.com/Indie Diarist. Again, links are in the description of the show. You can join the Discord community where we're always up to some fun. And there are some bits coming up for the Discord community. You can follow the YouTube channel, but most importantly, you can just follow me on social media and say hi. I think that is the one thing that I love the most, just speaking to all of you guys and learning what you like and dislike sometimes about the show. Other than that, if you're an indie game developer yourself, please get in touch because I would love to hear your story and feature you on one of my Indie Diaries. But until then, speak to you to the next episode of the Indie Diarist.